don't say the N-word.
The N-word is just a word.
What is that?
Can I say you can stop working? You monkey!
Tenfold gamers, we got a cold black. I repeat, there's a Porsche Primate playing.
Wait, how you even know I black?
Negro, please. By how you breathe, I could tell you's a moon cricket.
Now you see, that's racist and ableist. Because I actually have asthma.
Listen here, boy. Why don't you go play some 2K or GTA? This here might be out of your league.
Sir, this is Mario Kart.
This ever happened to you? Well, you may be entitled to
some copium. Because racism is to gaming what Yoko Ono was to John Lennon. My big and be them women, them and man, them, listen here. For many folk them of the palm persuasion, racism is limited to obvious incidents, such as the litany of gamer words littered throughout the intro of the video.
Gamer words. They call them gamer words, my nigga.
But what if I told you? From Halo 2, online lobbies, where I would get porn, different slurs in different languages, to the very game mechanics and design, like, look at this mask. Like, seriously, look at the mask, lip and nose.
What have I got?
They did not just go ooga booga and then start playing African polyrhythms.
Y'all really had my Archie playing Nintendo 64, your buttermilk, what was supposed to be a reprieve from the soul-crushing nature of capitalism, the rapture that is white supremacy. Instead of gaming being a migration from the mundanity of modern life, it was an extension for we people who are darker than blue, or even a part 2 of the misogyny that women and femdom face in the workplace, and a constant erasure or even existential dread for the queer folk them who, if lucky enough to find themselves in these games, they won't make it to the third cutscene due to the bury a gays trope.
We have nearly 300 beaches in Puerto Rico. And each one...
Farewell. My prince.
Well, he doesn't even get a kiss goodbye, though.
I would never go after the most marginalized class in the world, gamers, without some nuance, which is what I found in droves when researching this video. Whether it be the black oasis of the fighting game community.
Fighting games are black.
Very black.
Like if you look at the top fighting game players from America, they're all black. I am a semi-pro Tekken player. I played pros. Enabled my, I ain't gonna lie.
Or the enabling of my disabled folk them to engage with their reality in ways that society forbade.
I think of the disabled folk them like folks that like can't get out into a lot of physical spaces because they're literally marginalized to the point like where architecture is preventing them from getting into spaces.
You know, when we think about like how ableist like a lot of these gaming spaces are, right? I remember going to like one of these esports tournaments and it's a beautiful facility. The first question I said, I was like, if we had one of our players and our athletes that was in a wheelchair, how would they get to this stage? And nobody had like even considered that. I'm like, do we have enough ramps? You know, do we have access, you know, to get like to these spaces? And they didn't even think about that.
And even how gaming allows for folks with gender dysphoria to find themselves through their avatar.
I think gaming has really been that beautiful space that has allowed people to really be who they are. I had an article, in the Journal of Lesbian Studies that talked about how like black queer folks and black trans folks, you know, they aren't able to be out in their lives. You know, they had to, you know, they were misgendered in their physical world, but like in the gaming space, they could tell people who they are and then people respect them for that. You know, you can kind of create whatever identity you want. And if it's more aligned with like who you are, people can do that inside the gaming space. In text-based chat or voice-based communities, you know, we have found, you know, these different spaces of like protection, you know, for for our own identities. I remember having like this conversation, with this one, trans girl, and she was talking, she was like, I can't tell my family about any of this, but like in gaming, I'm able to do and be, the fullness of who I am inside the space. And I thought that was like really dope. In workplaces and in school, we have to hide those aspects of ourselves.
Which is why in today's episode of Everything is Racist, no, I'm not being facetious, literally everything, I want to investigate why, despite the good of gaming, is it a matrix for becoming a bigot? Is it a chicken or the egg insofar as the games themselves exacerbating the existing proclivities of the cishet white mandem, or do they corrupt the communities themselves?
People make memes about like the Modern Warfare 2 lobbies and stuff, but like it was like a very real thing.
Old school Call of Duty lobbies rivals the Clan and how racist that is. Okay, you got some 12-year-old white boy with a high-pitched voice. We call them squeakers, and they would use the hard R every 15 seconds.
In public lobbies, I experienced just a lot of like, I guess it would be qualified as like edgy humor.
They get trash at the game, then they get racist. Hey, you cousin, your cousin.
And it was all just kind of like accepted at that point.
Any fellow racist in this lobby?
You know it, man. The fact that it's hypothetic, there's no victim of the crime.
It's all like edgy humor. There's no difference.
All epicenter events like Gamergate was the of the internet, in how it irrevocably changed IRL and URL interpersonal relationships and discourse themselves.
August of 2014, Depression Quest game dev Zoe Quinn receives violent harassment after the game's release. Ex-boyfriend Iran Yorni creates a false narrative that Quinn is sleeping with game journalists for good reviews of the game. There is no evidence of this. The journalist never even reviewed the game in any formal capacity. 4chan gets involved, making more and more violent threats against Quinn under false pretenses. Adam Baldwin creates the hashtag Gamergate. Gamergaters then move to harassing any women in gaming journalism like Arnita Sarkeesian. This includes a mass shooting threat that caused her to have to cancel events. Gamergate supporters decide that anyone who can be considered an SJW to be an immediate threat to gaming. Feminist Triggered and SJW Getting Owned compilations on YouTube boom into the hundreds of millions of views. Young boys watch these and then become radicalized by the alt-right propaganda.
And the compartmentalization necessary for marginalized folks to be in community with those who deny their own humanity.
Growing up in the late 90s was a weird time to get into gaming as a Black woman in America, especially in the Deep South. I was getting picked on in middle school for having a Sonic Adventure and Sonic Advance guidebook with me, reading that stuff. I was the only chocolate chip in the whole cookie. The only chocolate chip. And I still tried to fit in, but I could still feel I was being othered. And this time it was not just because of my hobbies. Something else was, a little different. When you are put in a position of, I really, really want to fit in and I'll do anything to fit in, you find yourself in less than desirable places.
The sky is blue. The grass is a delightful shade of green. Leaves are falling from the sky in autumn, depending on where in the world you are. And as nature demands, the gaming industry is as racist as can. You don't need little old me to tell you that, do you?
Dance, little monkey, dance!
As a matter of fact, you don't have to delve too deep in the internet to expose the amalgamation of isms within gaming and inherently biased developers, marketers, and those who purchase, play, and form the basis of the consumer base.
The middle class back then, even more than it is now, was very, very white. Gaming was kind of a luxury item even back then, and almost exclusively bought and played in white suburbia. This was 20, 30 years after the whole white flight thing, I think.
This is a residential street in southwest Atlanta. Not long ago, all the persons who lived here were white. But recently, a few Negro families moved in, and a scene too familiar in other areas of Atlanta was repeated.
We have to talk about things like white flight, right? That suburban context that you're talking about is white flight.
The white residents started moving out. For sale signs went up. The street became what is known as transitional.
Hi, it's Haley Williams. Check out the music video video for my song Glum on YouTube and YouTube Shorts, directed by my friends AJ Gibney and Zach Farrow.
That stage when Negroes are moving in and white people are leaving.
Back in the day, we were all on farms, and industrialization happened. Then we went to cities, started working like in factories, and white folks were in those spaces too. But when black folks, especially with in the United States context, when the migration like from the south like to the north like happened, and from rural areas to like urban areas happened, white folks was like, we don't want to be around these niggas.
Soon this street may be resegregated, Aldgrove. The Atlanta Planning Department has warned that if this trend continues, it's just a matter of time until Atlanta will become an island of Negroes surrounded by a sea of white suburbanites.
We talk about white flight just like we talk about like gentrification, policies that impacted that, the government programs that enabled, those things to happen, even also stripped away the like black growth, black mobility, like to really like, develop like this, like a strong black middle class. Like what was happening was white folks also took their money, they took their businesses, they took their companies. That moved to suburbanization, white folks really had like this individualistic like mindset also. And we see that in a lot of things. So we see that in conversations like around like competition, that there are very individual like mindset. And you see that kind of reflected like in black folks, but to me and for a lot of folks, a lot of scholars that write about this, that's like a settler colonial like mindset. That's like white supremacist like mindset.
Suburbia specifically contributes a lot to, I think, how the gaming community was fostered. As a kid growing up in suburbia, you will at best have one or two friends that are close enough to walk to. Most of your contact with the outside world is through these consoles. And again, these consoles are also primarily composed of other middle class, like young white men.
That isolated suburban experience is not too typical for black folks. Like that edgelord identity isn't allowed for black children because like our elders would be like, nah, don't do that. Somebody come and get us out of that. You know what I'm saying? We're not going to be allowed to go down that route too early. We're going to take you to church.
It adopts a lot of their tendencies. I mean, I'm one of them. I think what that does, what suburbia does alongside that, it turns like racism and any sort of like bigotry like
hypothetical.
Yes! Racism for them is a bonding practice. In their heads, they're not being racist. It's just, we like to say and make fried chicken and watermelon jokes. We don't hate black people. And then you get a black person in there and they're calling you and making chicken and watermelon jokes. And you're like, hey, can you stop? And they're like, what? We're just joking. I'm like
when you are not exposed to other like races, other cultures, other struggles to a kid like that, it's basically the same as like a curse word. We're like, you're not supposed to say this. And then you say it, and then that's the funny part.
At its rawest, the gaming industry casually reinforces Eurocentric whitewashed historical beauty standards through character customization and designs. While it can be a breeding ground for Nazis and other nationalists to fantasize about alternative timelines and to harass players within marginalized communities.
It sounds like you think the end game is that whites should become a minority.
I guess, I just don't understand how you think that, being white is such an important part of being an American.
It's a principle. Why is it bad that they remain a majority then?
I've already said why, because you're talking about restricting immigration from a ton of different areas in order to
Why not? Why do we have to take immigration from all these areas?
Because it helps grow the size of the economy and it brings talent in from other areas to continue to benefit the entire country.
It benefits the global elites. That's the only people it benefits. Let's just say that we admit a Mexican immigrant to the country. But if swaths of illegal immigrants pour across the border, we can't do anything about it under pain of being called racists. When that Mexican immigrant steps into America and sees that nothing's changed because the Mexicans have brought their Mexican culture with them, he says, what the heck?
For many, however, games are a method of igniting their interest in history, achieve creative, self-imposed goals, and experiment with gender away from prying, bigoted eyes.
I am a lifelong gamer. I grew up in rural Kentucky. Some people see that kind of gaming as very isolated, you're on your own. We were very communal in our gaming, from jump.
Just the general communal nature of black people. If you live in a city, You got cousins all over that city. You probably got cousins whose house you could walk to. We're all collectively organizing to raise and take care of families.
We have communal lives. You know, we think about like even like our households, like it's intergenerational. Like when my mama got sick, my mom moved in with me. I'm like, that's just kind of like how we live.
This always confused me, like watching Home Alone, and they would see their cousins and it would seem like an event. It would be like a special occasion to see grandma. And it's like, I see my grandmother every weekend.
We have friends that came over. You know, I had a homie that had the Nintendo 64. I had the Sega. Somebody had the Dreamcast. Somebody else had the GameCube. You know, because, you know, we couldn't have them all. You know, so we coordinated our efforts, you know, to make sure that at least the whole neighborhood had at least all those consoles.
A lot of the Call of Duty, definitely Madden and 2K, and these are communal games.
It's no wonder that that's also reflected in our gaming practices too, of like, you know, we're not going to just be gaming by ourselves. You know, we're going to be gaming with everybody.
I think the way Black people engage with gaming reflects the way Black people have engaged with community.
Gaming always feels like isolated to me.
I'll never forget, I had one white friend, he had games I had never. What is Final Fantasy? You have brothers. Why do you have so many one-player games? I'll be so. It was dope. I was like, this looks really cool. When is my turn to play? The way suburbs work for white people is this is my place. This is my household.
It's like fascinating then to see them in like the esports space. That's them trying to practice being communal. They are still very like isolated and alone and individualistic. They ain't got it, and that's okay. Those kids on those esports teams, they would much rather prefer, you know, to be in their rooms gaming. I'm like, just leave them in their rooms. Their anxieties is high. They stressed out. Everybody watching them look like, don't make them do that.
But far too often, it is a form for anonymous, friendly banter or edgy speak, which is caucus for, you know, casual racism. With most things, problematic behavior is enabled, stemming from developers who deliberately craft narratives in unspecified Caribbean paradises with NPCs who are caricatured stereotypes requiring rescue by the incredibly morally upstanding white saviors.
There's a game called Assassin's Creed Black Flag, where they are in the Caribbean, and man, let me tell you, like they really did us dirty.
How you feel about that?
When it comes to Caribbean representation, we're either all weed smoking, gun toting Jamaicans, which I'm not, I'm from the Bahamas, but you think Shark Tale, you think things like even Belly, like black films like Belly, or you even think like GTA, like if you want to get to the games, like GTA has Lil Jacob, and he's like this Caribbean mystical Negro that's just violent and a crime lord and all that shit. And like when you think about like what positive or what like nuanced representation of Caribbean culture do you get in anything? There's not many places where I can point to and I'm like, oh, okay, that's me.
The caricature.
Exactly. There's a travesty in me, it's a parody in me, it's a shadow.
Oh, Sebastian!
And then you got the prominent figures in these communities like PewDiePie, JonTron, XQC. You know, when he's not stealing everybody's content.
I'm gonna give it a buck. I'm gonna give it a buck. I could take my daily check and buy your entire bloodline.
Who also contribute their propagation of certain narratives and normalization of certain behaviors as well as attitudes. PewDiePie, JonTron, and XQC have all been caught using anti-black slurs in front of a very impressionable young audience, as Felix actually claims, an army of 9-year-olds, and they still unfortunately enjoy lingering online acclaim. For you all who expecting a segment on Video Game Donkey, given that, you know, I use him as a censor anytime I say the word then you because Video Game Donkey is obviously a black old woman.
To be real with you, I don't know how you accidentally say that. Like, just like, there's been no situation where I'm angry at a game and I'm just like, I want to say a slur right now, or just I say it without even thinking. When you do something without thinking, it's because you're used to doing it. Yeah, there's a clip like months later after the whole controversy where he almost says it again in a Fortnite game. Him saying that caused people to look back at his former stuff, and then it turns out he made like a lot of Nazi jokes, like an uncomfortable amount of them. Like he also just had I don't think it was a Nazi uniform, but it was him pretending to be a Nazi for a short clip, similar to the Anita Sarkeesian thing. It went from like analyzing gaming as a whole to like the specific people most famous for it, and it again had this massive defensive response because like a lot PewDiePie was millions of people's childhoods. So like it again felt like another like big personal attack on them.
The common thread between these instances is a gaming industry saturated predominantly by white people who too often exhibit a far inflated senses of importance than deserved. With their newfound power, they are provoked by the inclusion of any demographic outside the narrow focus on able-bodied cishet white mandem. And of course, late-stage capitalism further exacerbates this by naturally rewarding negative behavior, as the system inherently requires discrimination to thrive.
I'm trying not to drop names on purpose because I don't want this to come back to either of us. I knew this guy. He sees something in me that kind of affirms the otherness that I had been going through for a bit. So kind of cling to that attention. I'm in his Discord and it's like, okay, he streams, it's whatever, it's cool. And in trying to fit in so much, I miss microaggressions. I miss slamming women that are half my size for being too fat. And when you're in a dark place already and you're just trying to fit in, it's easy to let those things slide because, again, when I grew up playing video games, it's easier to cling on to someone who's like, they see me, they want to be around me, and I'll tolerate this just to be around them.
The pathetic threat of boycotts and protests by fragile white racist gamers always work, which adds to why they feel so deeply emboldened to continue perpetuating racial hegemony and supremacy within games. Let's look a bit deeper though. Reactionaries love outrage, which is why racists collectively lost their damn mind when Miles Morales was introduced as the new Spider-Man. Let's wait until they realize that Gwen Stacy is a bisexual trans icon. The character, design, and developers face constant criticism, reflecting the resistance to further diversifying the superhero video game landscape. From the moment Miles Retro Ones left a footprint on the side of the Empire State Building. You don't believe me? Well, thankfully, we have the brilliant Shakespearean rambles of a GameSpot reviewer who remarked that Miles was a hero with
the exaggerated swagger of a black teen.
Whatever that means. The uproar surrounding the surprisingly great portrayal highlights the ongoing struggle for inclusivity and representation in the gaming industry. And luckily, the majority of consumers genuinely enjoyed the game, and it's since received so much acclaim that games with similar mechanics and physics are always compared to Miles Morales' Spider-Man. But I can't get that verbiage out my head. It's not overtly racist in its use of slurs, and in fact, I actually would prefer that Miles Morales swings differently than Peter Parker. But what makes it seem more threatening is its proper grammar and stellar vocabulary, all of which are used to politely dehumanize and other black men.
Now,
with Thrivent, your financial plan is bigger than just you. Your finances can be a force for good for the ones you hold in your heart. Because our business is helping your money mean so much more. Thrivent, where money means more.
Now, for me, I like seeing the visibility of like black folks like in those kinds of spaces, but I'm also not one that's like influenced by those to think that that's the only narrative of blackness. You know, that's just like a singular vision of like blackness. Like,
why is the term swagger being associated specifically with black characters? You never hear anybody talking about the swagger of...
The exaggerated swag comment gets more hate than it deserves. I love that Miles Morales moves completely different than the other. Somebody in there had to say, hey, I feel like Miles Morales would swing differently than Peter Parker.
You know, we got black uncles as criminals. They went to jail before them, but that's not the only story of like blackness, but that's the only thing that we get. You know, it's like the singular narrative. It's a limited vision of like black lives. Now, I think that's the danger, especially for a lot of white audiences who don't want to see black folks outside of that.
I love the attempt at black hair.
I would would never say that, you know, I hate these stereotypical representations. I just want to see more. You know, when you give us like the uncle that's the pimp, okay, we know the uncle that's a pimp. Give us some more. When we have an uncle that's a drug dealer, okay, but give us more, you know, and then they stop right there and think that they have, you know, captured the essence of blackness.
That also gets the absence of black people in the room when the games are being made. There's not enough black people in the room, so when our stories and our depictions are there, it's very shallow, very one-dimensional.
This bias is exemplified in games like Grand Theft Auto Vice City, where the character modeled after Ray Liotta and Tom Vassetti walks upright, while Franklin, the black character, has a distinctive swaggerific gait with a bop in his step that looks like he just dropped a hot pound of mess in his drawers.
Like, gaming is an expensive hobby to get into. They used to be like kind of more accessible, similar to how movies were with like arcades. But then once like home consoles started getting popular, there was like a big money like barrier to enter the hobby. Consoles cost around the same when adjusted for inflation, but like games, they're $60 now, like big releases, but they were $60 back in the mid 1980s too. If you bought like Aladdin for the NES, that was like the equivalent of $130 now.
Ah, damn, play some fucking defense. Like, just try.
Continuously provided solace to communities like my disabled folk, them aforementioned, who have been marginalized.
Got 4 points and no stops.
Societal structure that prevents them from fully engaging with the world and even themselves. Or games like VR Chat, IMVU for your veterans out there who actually know about what I'm talking about. And most recently, Roblox have proven to be suitable meeting grounds for wanting alternatives. I ain't gonna lie. I mean, when Roblox isn't literally trying to recreate some of the most heinous happenings in the last few centuries or grooming children.
Let me get a rate right quick, bro. Yo. Let me see some work, man. Let's go, man. Let's go, man. I used to hate monkeys like you, bro. I used to hate monkeys like you, bro.
Get back to work! I said get back to work, blood! Get back to work! Did I say you could stop working? You monkey!
Virtual reality allows people to live vicariously through their carefully curated skins that may even come with abilities and emotes like on Fortnite or VR Chat. Modified hardware means that they can be freely customized with inclusive software, like sound cues or choosing the avatar's voice, giving young, curious femmes the chance to experiment with things that they are typically gendered out of or feel unsafe to in our current society. A 2006 study analyzed the social interactions of adolescents on the autism spectrum, or those with ASD, autism spectrum disorder, whilst playing a massive multiplayer online role-playing game, to review the ways in which virtual reality could assist in forming meaningful relationships for those struggling to physically socialize. Researchers concluded that the preconceived notion of gaming didn't stop those with ASD from effectively communicating. In fact, the universal proliferation of technology and boom in MMOs have fostered a welcoming environment to show off skills, form friendships based on completing shared objectives, and a myriad of participatory interactions.
My parents told me that when I was a baby and they took me in for my checkup, the doctor diagnosed me more or less with autism because of the shape of my head, nothing else. But I was a low-verbal child. I had fewer milestones, and that could have been the abuse that I had under my birth mother. But as I've gotten older and I look at, you know, especially autism and ADHD in women, I'm over here like, some of those things click. And get it, I'm probably right on the cusp of the spectrum, but you know what? I'm still me. But growing up where I did in the boonies of Mississippi.
Helping others is the key to a strong community. This season, as part of the Subaru Loves to Help initiative, Subaru and its retailers are proud to partner with Operation Warm to donate brand new coats.
Nigga dunk. Oh my god.
Urgent need situations. The Subaru Loves to Help initiative is part of the Subaru Love Promise.
Oh my god, it's a fast break and you can't score! Jesus!
I didn't really have anyone else to talk to about video games. Because, one, if you can't tell by how I don't sound to some people black enough. And my parents insisted that I speak properly. I had a lot of white comments growing up, like, oh, you must think you're white, oh, you must think you're this. So, in addition to already being black, I was being othered. And, you know, just by the fact of I was a black female playing video games when all of the girls my age were playing dolls. The boys, they may have been playing video games, but I wasn't included because I was a girl. So, it's
No way.
a very othering experience when you grow up in a poor area because my parents weren't affluent. We were really just one missed paycheck from being, you know, having our house foreclosed on.
Many are unaware of this, but at the start of the gaming craze of the 1980s, women and femmes constituted over 25% of the market. As the stereotype was
Anything.
that the arcades belonged
He can't
to
do
women,
anything. This is
which
a
relegated
guard.
girl gamers to their homes to play Atari. This sneaky branding technique definitely
He
cut
can't
off
do
developers'
shit.
noses to spite their faces by not cultivating an inclusive environment that would bridge the gender gap, increase sales, and set the tone for the next 3 decades of gamer culture.
Gaming was like kind of gender neutral before the game crash in 1983. Like back then, it was like Pong. Like Pong is not appealing to any specific gender. After everything kind of fell apart with like a lot of bad games being made and PCs becoming more popular, Nintendo kind of revived the whole gaming industry in the US. While researching for how to like market, they found that boys tended to play games more than girls did. And so they decided to shift their marketing to just specialize entirely in men, like men and boys. Everything in gaming for basically decades was designed specifically with men in mind. I could definitely see how there is a lot of inherent misogyny in that. Even people working in the industry, it was almost entirely just like, you know, white dudes. The white dudes in the rooms making those games, like they probably weren't trying to do anything bad necessarily. They just literally didn't know what they were doing in regards to that.
And amidst the pervasive high aroma of Axe body spray, there was a silver lining. As usual, women play a pivotal role in the marketing enhancement, constituting approximately 48% of the United States. The Gamergate episode was marked by an uptick in disturbing incidents, such as death, the R word, doxing, and assault threats over titles with plots that deviate from the white cis hetero narrative. But that didn't deter women from buying en masse and supporting creators.
The Gamergate era cannot be understudied.
It was the first time people felt large-scale, like a quote-unquote attack on their isolated environment.
The Gamergate era is, to me, a canon event.
Gamergate. Anita Sarkeesian. She made this thing basically criticizing gaming culture, which was unheard of at that time. At least with that scale and visibility, probably some black femmes and whatnot was talking about that from time.
It's all right. We'll give Anita her little flowers.
That is the moment where all of these hypothetically racist, young white, socially disaffected men organized in a way that they didn't even know was possible. And once they did, it changed the world. The way the internet works today is shaped by Gamergate. The way our politics work today is shaped by Gamergate.
When racists and other gamers who enjoy the various isms that are rightfully being seen now as immoral and primitive in the modern age, what they fail to comprehend is that the presence of other groups pumps the industry with fresh stories and promises continued improvement to the technological options like refresh rate and texture patches. With that statistic in mind, how much should we praise conglomerates worth billions of dollars for doing the absolute minimum to appease such a diverse audience? By bowing to the whims of white mediocrity, white men remain the face of the industry to be the designated saviors in every
Do something!
The real impact of Gamergate was congealing
suck.
the alt-right, anti-woke identity into a thing, and how that has manifested in everything from Donald Trump to Andrew Tate to Twitter to Twitter trolls. One issue.
Who did that?
4chan, anti-vaxxers, like all of that, to me, starts with Gamergate
Once again, using Far Cry's compelling villains and their iconography and immersive, engaging gameplay, the fifth game in the series was originally expected to battle a violent white supremacist cult in the Montana area. As per usual, cue the fragile white racist tantrums with the works. And by the works, I'm talking about kicking, screaming, tweets, sweaty Reddit posts at 3 a.m. and threats of boycotts for good measure. This unsurprisingly led to the developers toning down the racist elements of the antagonist by introducing a few black men as villains within a far-right Christian cult in Montana. And I think it's worth noting that the inclusion of these black characters in this context surpassed the actual demographic makeup of Montana's population.
I've had my moments of trolling America Online chat rooms, right? So, like, I get it. When I left the house, there was shame attached to that behavior. When I cut off the screen, there was shame attached to that behavior. Now you do that and then you show your friends. Now you
Lord.
You brag about it on Twitter or 4chan. Look at this awful thing I did to somebody that I'll never face consequences for. And when that happened, there was a loss of access to functionally engage with a whole portion of people. The lasting impact of Gamergate is like up there with wars and COVID. Gamergate is up there, and I don't think people fully appreciate that.
Through our handy-dandy
That was a
Wayback
dot, okay.
Machine, I found screenshots of the since-deleted campaign, featuring a few troubling articles downplaying its hostility and a reply saved by the alleged original poster from the Change.org petition.
It's time to draw a line in the sand. We, the American gamers that make up the majority of your user base, demand to you cancel this game or alter it to be less offensive to your main player base. In these times, you must understand that there might be some violent repercussions if you intend to follow through with your pointless criticism.
What does it take to face cancer with confidence? It takes an expert team that knows your cancer down to the molecule and makes sure you understand every detail. It takes MSK.
You mean?
However, the fact that the developers ultimately adjusted the idea implies that the protest had a tangible impact, which is very disappointing and ironic given that the use of such a setting casually omits the approximately 7% Native American population, therefore raising questions about the game's realism and inclusivity.
Did Gamergate do justice for black women and femmes in particular, and black gamers?
One of the first stories that have to be told around it, white women who were impacted by the effects of Gamergate, they did not want
That is true.
coming and disrupting the conversations. Black women were trying to
That's weird because I'm live on YouTube right now and it works fine.
You know, Mike Brown was just killed. You know, they killed Tamir
weird.
Rice, and you know, and also like with Gamergate, like we're all experiencing like a lot black women comment.
I don't know why it's doing that.
Responded and said, "This is not a space for Black Lives Matter." Because in their mind, they saw it as like, okay, Black Lives Matter. That's black men being killed.
On YouTube, it's
they ignored and didn't realize like
everything is perfect.
You know, black women, black femmes, black trans folks like were like impacted.
I don't know why
too,
on here is
but then they
fucking
were
up.
like, this is a white woman's issue. They really saw themselves as like the pinnacle of the ones who were experiencing like the harassment. Black women were like, no, y'all's is just more visible.
That's weird.
We have been dealing historically with this since games went online. And we can even talk even more historically because we also deal with it like in the real world. There's protectionism for you, white lady. There is like this protection around white womanhood that has always been there, and it's like enacted, you know, to ensure that you're protected. Black women have not been extended that, right? White women have violated the rules of whiteness, excuse me. Because basically they were calling out white men. They were calling out the structures that white men had like created. You know, they're doing videos about how sexist things are.
I don't know why it's doing that on Twitch. I don't know why it's doing that.
I feel like that this
I have
was
no
like
idea.
some punishment, like, you know, of like, hey, we gotta teach them their lesson. We gotta show them that, you know, they have to rally around like white men. We're the leaders. We're the ones on top of this totem pole. And if they don't get in line, we're going to harass them. Like later, what we actually found out was that Gamergate was not that big. They were using bots. You know, they were maximizing, you know, the capacities of like the platforms and the technological tools to make it seem like it was larger than it actually was. And that's really like the story and the lesson that went into the alt-right, that went into the
Why is it doing that?
That kind of went into like the misinformation, fake news, kind of like things that led.
I'm not even watching what happened. I don't even give a fuck.
Hey, we don't need a mass, you know, to sustain like a social movement.